or welcome back to my channel. I'm Courtney and this is my life of projects where I talk with you about my knitting, spinning, quilting, and sometimes embroidery. If you have been here before, then you know I am once again not in my usual setup. So a week and a half ago, we were in St. Croix and I got to go snorkeling for the first time. So that was super fun. Never done it before, absolutely loved it. Can't wait to go again. However, I think the snorkel that I used had like a little bit of dampness, a little bit of mildew or mold. And because it was a rental, which is fine. But I'm super allergic to mildew and mold. So I ended up like this. It's not the flu, it's not RSV, it's not COVID. I got tested for everything because I had this trip, but it's just a sinus infection. I'm mostly over it, so hopefully it doesn't sound too terrible, and throughout this vlog, I'll get better. But that's why there was no vlog last week. I was too sick to do it when we got back from the trip, and I just decided I needed to rest, spend a lot of time on the couch, and I did actually get some knitting done. I just didn't feel like filming when I was that sick, and no one wants a voiceover when I sound like this. But this week I'm actually in Savannah, so I am here for a work thing, but I do have some time after some of the meetings, so I'm going to take you with me to a yarn store and a fabric store. I found two that are within walking distance of my hotel, super close actually. So I will take you to those and hopefully find some goodies that fit in my suitcase. We may have overpacked. So I'll show you some of Savannah and I will show you those in a little bit. But first I wanted to show you what I was working on last week while I was recovering from this. If you remember, one of my goals for 2023 is to knit 4 sweaters this year. So that means I basically need to knit 1 sweater every 3 months. So I really needed to get started on the first of those, and that is the cider sweater from Tin Can Knits, because I already had the yarn for that, and it's a hopefully pretty simple sweater. Again, if you've been watching my channel, you know my history with sweater knitting is that they never fit. So I did all of my measurements and I was between the extra small and the small, which makes me nervous because normally I'm usually a medium in most things. I do have broader shoulders from swimming as a child, but I decided to go up 1 more size to the small medium because based on my very tight knitting, I thought that would be a good plan. So I have started. It is knit from the bottom up and in the round, which is what I prefer. I like to avoid seams wherever I can. I am almost done with kind of the bottom band, and you can kind of see in my stitches right there, it's a little twisty because I've made the very bold choice to knit this continental. I'm not super fast at continental, but this has seed stitch pretty much throughout the whole thing. And with all of the knitting and purling, it will be faster if I get faster at continental. So not only are we knitting a sweater that we're not super great at, I'm also doing it in continental, which I'm not super great at, but we're gonna get better. And I did not swatch. So just terrible ideas all around. I didn't swatch because of the last sweater that I did do. I swatched 6 different swatches for, could not get gauge. So you know what, I'm just gonna go with it. We're guesstimating, we've sized up. The other thing I'm thinking about doing is this calls for size 4 and size 6 needles, size 6 when you switch over to the main body. I might go up to a 7. I'm debating that because I know with cabling, I tend to make things tighter. So we'll see. The other thing that I am liking about doing this continental is I'm actually knitting a lot looser because I can't hold the yarn as tight in my left hand as I hold it in my right. So I'm noticing already that my stitches are a lot, not a lot, they're just noticeably looser, which is saying something. So I'm thinking continental might help with the sizing and help me get gauge. But my plan is I'm going to continue knitting and I will check and see if I'm getting gauge. If If I'm not, then I'll make a decision to either rip it back or something. I don't know. We're just going with it at this point. We're gonna see what happens. It's an experiment. We're hopefully knitting a sweater that fits for once. I don't know. So while I'm on this trip, I'm probably not going to update you every single day. This is probably the only hotel room update you will get, but I will have some footage for you of the yarn stores I go to and a little bit of Savannah, and then I will catch up with you when I get back to Vermont.
So on Thursday, after my meetings, I walked over to Savannah Fabric Company, which was in a cute little neighborhood, definitely walkable from all of the hotels in the downtown Savannah area. And I love that Savannah has so many of these little postage stamp parks throughout the city and these gorgeous cobblestone streets and sidewalks. Savannah Fabric Company is a smaller store, but they had an amazing selection. I loved all of their fat quarters. They have a lot of really modern lines, Ruby Star, and several others that I'm a huge fan of. They just had a really nice setup for their shop, and they also had embroidery, which I appreciate. I almost grabbed one of these, but I had to resist. On Friday, our meetings actually wrapped up early. We actually had 2 different meetings during this time, so half of the meetings were done, and then I had others to go the next day. But my boss and I actually went over to the Frayed Knot in Savannah, and she's tried to start knitting a couple times before, but she wanted me to teach her, so we got supplies for her to learn how to make a hat. But I really loved the Frayed Knots selection. They had a lot of the staples, and then they had, of course, locally dyed Georgia yarns like these from Ryan Yarn, which I absolutely loved the base of. So many good colors as well. Then another thing I really loved about the Frayed Knot is that they had spinning supplies. Not many yarn stores carry roving and spinning wheels and drop spindles, but they had an awesome selection, so that was really fun to look through as well. Saturday was our last day of meetings, and I went out super early and grabbed coffee for some of my coworkers and an iced coffee for me. And then Saturday night, some of my coworkers and I went on a ghost tour through Savannah. It was super spooky and super fun. On Sunday, I flew back to Vermont, and I was pretty happy to see all of the snow. I had really missed that. So I am back in Vermont in the snow, and it has been a couple days. I took yesterday off completely. I just needed to recalibrate, get everything unpacked, and try to get my life in order for the rest of this week. But I just wanted to sit down really quickly and show you what I got at the different shops that I visited in Savannah. So at Savannah Fabric Company, I got a couple of things. The first thing I got were 2 fat quarters because, of course, I'm traveling. I can't take a lot of things with me. But I really loved these little turnip prints from Ruby Star, and they had them in 4 different colors, I think. But I just grabbed 2 of them to kind of be some inspiration for a future quilt. I'd really like to do something with this fabric line. So these are kind of my placeholder fat quarters that hopefully will get incorporated into a quilt after I finish all of the other ones that are currently in progress. Then I picked up this pattern. If you remember, one of my goals for 2023 is to overcome my fear of curves. And this looked like a really easy way to kind of break into doing curves on a quilt. I also like how minimalistic this pattern is. I could use different lines of solids or low volume fabrics to do this. So this is very much my aesthetic. So I'm cautiously optimistic that I can get this one done this year and get over some of those fears of curves. So we'll see how that goes. And one of the other things that Savannah Fabric Company had were these cute stickers. So if you've seen my sewing machine, you know I absolutely love stickers. So there's this one that's a little teal sewing machine. And then I got this one that says Bobbin Chicken Champion. Definitely been there. We all probably have. But I thought these would be super cute to put on my sewing machine, and I can't resist stickers, especially good ones that make me laugh. So I grabbed those as well. Then at the Frayed Knot, I picked up this skein of sock yarn. I don't need more sock yarn, but I really loved the pink and the speckles on this. And this was a local yarn dyer. It's actually from Athens, Georgia, which is not too far from Savannah, but it's a brand that I hadn't seen before. So I always love to get that vacation yarn when I can. This one is also on a base that I absolutely love. It's a 2-ply twist sock base that's 80% merino and 20% nylon. It's one of my favorite bases to use for socks. I also have some Madeline Tosh that I've picked out for a sweater I'm going to make later this year in my 4 sweaters in 1 year challenge that I set for myself. And I thought this would go perfectly with that yarn so that I can have some speckled pink socks to match my speckled pink sweater. So I'm really excited to start those socks once I finish the other pair that I'm currently working on. Which, speaking of, let me update you on where I'm at with my current projects. So during my work meetings, I did manage to finish 1 sock. I was probably right about here when I started. So I finished the rest of the foot and did the toe on this sock. And I cast on the second sock and about 2 inches or so into this one. So that pair of socks is coming along nicely, and I'm hoping to have that finished probably in February. Just depends on how much time I spend knitting socks versus the sweater that I have on the needle. So let's take a look at that. So as I mentioned, I'm trying to do 4 sweaters this year, and the first one I started with is the cider sweater from Tin Can Knits. And I'm using Madeline Tosh, Tosh DK in antique lace. So I have just gotten a little bit past the bottom band on the sweater, and I've done the first setup row and then I think 1 knit row of the cable repeats. So that took me a little bit of time to understand the pattern the way it was written. I was working the chart and I missed below the chart. It says to repeat one of the cable sections 4 times. Didn't see that. I got to the end of the section where I was supposed to move the marker and I'm like, I still have these stitches left. What's going on? So I had to go back and redo it and do the repeats as I was supposed to. So once I got that figured out, pattern made a little bit more sense. And I've been continuing on with that. I've only really been working on this sweater since about like the 15th or so. I didn't cast it on until like the middle of the month, so I'm a little behind, but I think I'm gonna be able to make that up if I really focus on only working on the sweater, putting down the socks and the other projects, and just really making this my dedicated project right now, so we'll see how that goes, but I'm really trying to get this one done in the time frame that I set for myself. The other thing that I may regret doing is knitting this Continental. I did actually switch over when I was doing the setup row for the cables and go back to English, just because the cabling with trying to learn Continental, it was a little bit harder. Like knitting and purling, Continental, not a problem, but doing the cabling with that was a little bit more than my brain could handle last night when I was actually working on that. So I switched back over to English, which I know it's gonna make my stitches a little bit wonky in places, but it's a handmade garment. It's going to have its own little design quirks, and I'm fine with it. It doesn't bother me if some of my stitches are a little looser or a little more twisted. I think that adds character and really shows that it's a handmade item. So it doesn't bother me to switch back and forth between the two when I'm working on projects. I know for some people it really bothers them to see how the stitches twist a little bit one way or the other, but I'm fine with it. So I'm going to carry on doing the majority of this in Continental to hopefully get faster, since so much of this is seed stitch, and I'm hoping that doing those knit and purls will be faster than when I do them English, just because you do have to move your hand so much more than in Continental, but I really just have to get faster at Continental. So I'm gonna work my way through it. We'll see. I hope that doesn't slow me down on my 3-month deadline too much. But so far I'm really enjoying this pattern. I did size up, like I think I mentioned in the intro to this video, and I also sized up one size in the needles, and I really think that's going to help me make it the size that I'm intending for it to be. We'll see. Like I said, I did not swatch because I like to live dangerously. I am definitely going to measure it when I get a little bit further along, just to kind of see if I'm way off or not, or if I think it will block to the size that I need it to. But I'm cautiously optimistic that it's going to work out. I have no idea if it will or not, but I don't know why I can't force myself to swatch and figure out what my gauge is, but it's fine. But I'm just gonna keep going. We'll see what happens. I'm not too terribly stressed out about it right now. Might be in the future, but right now I'm feeling cautiously optimistic. It looks like it's about the right size, but that's it for this week's video. I hope you enjoyed my trip to Savannah and the yarn store and fabric store that I visited. Be sure to check out their links and their social media down in the description box. Make sure you're subscribed so that you get notified when I post my next video, and I will see you in the next one.